Thank you for joining us today on The Next Chapter. I am Walter V. Murray, your host. Today we have some remarkable guests who will share with us some incredible insights and information here on The Next Chapter. Dr. Parks, welcome to The Next Chapter.
Good to be here.
So good to see you. How have you been keeping?
I've been doing well, kind of dealing with a little bit of a recovery. My husband passed last year, but I've been able to get through it by God's help.
Great. Well, we're so glad to have you here on The Next Chapter. And I look forward to, I can't wait to get into this topic today. It's a very interesting topic. Mm-hmm. A couple of days ago on CNN, the World Health Organization released a study. Very fascinating. And here's what it said. It said that people in wealthier countries report depression 15% at a 15% rate. Mm-hmm. People in poorer countries report depression at an 11% rate. And so I thought, well, money can't buy you peace of mind, now can it?
No, it cannot.
I tell you, we'll talk some more about that as we move into the interview. But one of the things that I found is that people have to have a definition of things. It's always good to define terms. So what is the definition of depression? How do you define depression?
Well, depression is really something hard to define, especially a disorder like that. It's usually diagnosed based on a series of symptoms. Okay. And there are 9 different symptoms that we look at for major depressive disorder. So you could tell me what it looks like, yes, rather than fitting it into a box. Fitting it into a box, okay. That's right. Yeah. So that's probably more useful anyway. It is. Yeah, 'cause sometimes a definition can get lost in terms of terminology. Mm-hmm. You define it one way, then you have to define your definition. Right. But if you tell me what to look for, I could spot it. Right. Great. Right. Well, I hear people using that a lot, definition of depression. Yeah. It's hard to give a definition of a disorder. Mm. So I like to answer the question with what is depression? Okay. And depression, actually, that's not easy to give either, but it's the reason that it's not is because we usually diagnose it based on a cluster of symptoms, and there's several symptoms that are usually shown with depression. We all get sad. I mean, that's just part of human nature. But clinical depression is a little more than human nature. Okay. You know? So just me getting sad doesn't mean I'm depressed? No, it does not. That's a load off my mind. That's a load off my mind. Tell the viewers a little bit about your background, what you've done, where you've been. I have been in the field of psychology for about, this really ages me, 23 years. Well, we'll edit that up. 23 years, taught for 7 years, was in private practice for 13 years, and then my husband and I started a health organization in 2007. And that's what I've been doing since, written a couple of books, doing a lot of seminars, and have come to a new way of looking at treatment too, probably in the last 4 years, and we'll probably talk about that as time. Well, that is the topic of your new book. It's called Treating Depression Naturally. Yes. When I think of treatment, it brings a very clinical concept picture to mind. Treatment means going to a doctor, taking drugs, taking medication. But then when you put treating depression naturally, it sort of disrupts my vision, my concept of clinical treatment. So we'll talk some more about treating depression naturally. That's a very interesting topic. Fact or fiction? Fact or fiction? This is a pop quiz for you. Okay. Back in school. Back in school. Now, on the street, you hear everything. Everybody's an expert. And one of the things that I've heard is that men suffer from depression more than women do. Fact or fiction? Definitely fiction. Is that right? Well, let me kind of back up on that. Fiction in terms of what the statistics are showing. Because when women go to the doctor, it's real interesting. When they go to the doctor with the same symptoms, and then a man goes to the doctor with the same symptoms, they're sometimes diagnosed differently. Is that right? That's right. And so what we have is that because of that, sometimes women are diagnosed with depression more than men. And, our society allows women to express their feelings and everything a little bit more. So people people will pick that up a little bit more with women than men. But statistically, it does show that women, they're depressed more than men, or I should say diagnosed with depression more than men. And some of that is biological as well, because of the different things that we women go through biologically that can affect hormonal functioning and all of that.
Interesting. See, I didn't know that. I'm already beginning to learn some information here. Now, one of the things that I've found is that, especially in the world of religion and spiritual thought, is that some people have a concept that if you are a Christian, you shouldn't get depressed. Now, I've struggled with that because when I look at some of the great giants in the Bible, they seem to have gone through some depression.
Yes.
And so, how do you connect spirituality with depression?
You mentioned some of the great giants. When we look at the Psalms, David, some of his Psalms, you could tell there was some depression going on there. And then Elijah wished to die. I don't know if we would diagnose them with clinical depression, but they had some type of depression. Sometimes depression can be due to lifestyle, which we'll talk about earlier. And you could pray a lot and have a wonderful relationship with God. But if there's certain things that you're not doing to take care of your brain and your body, depression can set in foot. So it's not necessarily a reflection of where you are with God all the time. Sometimes it can be. So it's not. It wouldn't. So you would say then it's not a fair leap to make from depression, to leap from someone being depressed to someone's relationship. I mean, there's really no direct connection. Sometimes there is. Right. Sometimes, but not all the time. Great. Excellent. We talk about lifestyle a lot, right? For example, I know sometimes I'm working on a big project, right? And I need to get it done. So I'll stay up till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning just working on that project. The next day, and this is what my wife tells me, I'm really grumpy. I'm really just like on edge. And so there seems to be this connection between just excessive work, I guess, and maybe my mental or emotional state of being. Is that just me being grumpy? People call me a grumpy old man sometimes. Is that just me being grumpy, or is that maybe a connection between my lifestyle? There is definitely a connection between the two. Talk about that. When you look at what happens when you sleep, there's a lot of things that go on. For example, there's a hormone known as melatonin that is released when you sleep, but it's only released at a critical time period, and that is actually between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., but it starts to peak at about 12. And so if you're not getting that proper sleep during that time, the proper melatonin is not being released. And guess what melatonin turns into during the day? Serotonin, which is a mood regulator. So if you're not getting enough melatonin, you won't have enough serotonin, which in turn can affect your mood. So that peak time is 12 o'clock? Yes. But that's when I do my best work. Oh, well. I guess I have to change and make some changes. Yes. It would be good. Your wife would appreciate it. She would appreciate it. I'm sure she would. In reading your book, I see you use a term called true science. That really grabs me. What exactly, because I'm thinking, true science versus false science? I mean, what exactly was true science? What was your intent in that question? My intent was to help people, especially Christians, distinguish between science that has some foundation, which is biblical, versus science that does not. I mean, everybody's doing science, and one day you hear this is not good, and the next day you hear that is not good. But for us as Christians, I believe we need to have something to measure it by to determine, okay, I'll take this one and I'll throw the other one out. And so science that's based on biblical principles is what I call true science. Then I can run with it when I see that science. So from that perspective, then when you look at some of the lifestyle things that we do that may lead to depression, what are some of those other things that lifestyle that could affect depression or create depression? A major one is diet. And the sad thing is I didn't learn this when I was training for my doctoral program. It was years later that I learned this. I mean, I could have, I'll share that later, but I could have saved people a lot of money. I would have not have been as rich. Well, it's true. I would have saved people some money, but how we eat has a lot to do with the functioning of our brain. A lot of the food that we eat, the fuel for our brain comes from the food that we eat. And so if we're filling our brain with with fatty foods, with foods that have no nutrients, our brain will not function as well. And then in turn, we can develop not only depression, but other mental disorders as well. Like, for example, one important food that true science is now showing is omega-3.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of talk about omega-3 lately.
Yes, and omega-3, I have case studies where I worked with people and they started taking omega-3 and reported a significant decrease in their depressive symptoms.
Is that right?
And that's found in foods such as walnuts, foods such as roasted pumpkin seeds. They might not sound the most exciting to eat, but flax seeds are good with omega-3, and all of these foods can be helpful.
So when you talk about true science, is it an application of some of these natural remedies?
Yes.
That are not only biblical, but they're time tested.
Exactly.
And time proven.
Exactly.
So applying some of these principles to our daily lives.
Yes.
That can help reduce the incidence of depression.
Yes. Can I give a case example?
Sure.
A woman came into me, she was crying excessively, had no clue as to why she was crying so much. Felt like her life was wonderful, didn't think she was depressed, but of course everybody said you're depressed, you need to go see a psychologist. And she came in, and at that time I had changed how I was treating people. And I said to her, let's try you just taking some flax seeds every morning. I had her grind the flax seeds because you get more, they're more potent when you grind them. She started doing 2 to 3 tablespoons, and then she liked it and started putting it in all her foods. After seeing her 2 times, she said the crying completely stopped.
Wow.
Now, normally I would say she's depressed. Let's talk about your childhood. Let's talk about how your marriage is, what's going on the job. But just by increasing her omega-3, the crying stopped. So it was showing that that was a nutritional deficiency and not necessarily things going on in her life that was leading to the depression.
Excellent. What is some of the, I noticed you talked about exercise.
Yes.
Now, I think about exercise and I think about losing weight. I'm trying to lose weight myself.
Okay.
So when I hear the word exercise, I'm thinking weight loss. I'm thinking building muscle mass.
Yes.
Last thing on my mind is avoiding depression. Well, what is this connection between exercise and depression?
Well, there's a lot of connections. The main one is that when you're outside exercising, it increases some, you've heard of the runner's high?
Yeah.
I can't remember the particular chemical. No, it's not adrenaline. I'm blanking on it right now. But the same thing that occurs with the runner's high is a similar thing that occurs when you're walking. It just calms the mood. Serotonin increases when you're exercising, not just walking. You're also exposed to more fresh air if you're doing the exercise outside. And fresh air is also one of those things that can be helpful because it helps the blood circulate more. You get more blood to the brain. Exercise sometimes helps you sleep better, which sometimes, as we mentioned earlier, can lead to depressive symptoms. So,
great. So we've talked about diet. We've talked about exercise. We've talked about rest. Those are some things that are very free. I mean, as a practicing psychologist, you might be putting yourself out of business here.
You know, it's interesting you should say that. My receptionist told me that one time when I started changing how I was treating. People started calling in and saying, okay, I don't need to come in and see Dr. Parks anymore because I'm doing better. And she said, you're not going to make much money doing like this. But, if you're in it to help people, that shouldn't be the a motivating factor.
In the long run, everybody benefits.
That's right.
You have clients who are have more money in their pocket, which probably helps with depression too.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the topics in the book in terms of treating depression naturally.
Okay.
So if you make a diagnosis of someone who might have depression, how receptive are they to these types of treatments? Because, there's the concept out there that if I go to a doctor, I want medication.
That's right. It's interesting you mentioned medication. There's more and more research coming out about antidepressants. I am not one to say do not use antidepressants,